A standard residence is divided into a kitchen, a bathroom, one or more bedrooms, a living room, and maybe some other rooms we're meant to inhabit according to their pre-specified functions. But is that really how we inhabit these spaces? A cursory glance around the kitchen may produce some vegetables and a coffee maker, sure, but in equal measure one starts to notice unopened mail resting patiently on the dining table, a child's toy, a purse, all trappings of domestic spatial crossbreeding. We categorize and organize and compartmentalize, and it all makes sense, and for a second everything feels like it's under control. The world is balancing effortlessly on a pinhead. Then the dog needs to be fed, and the phone rings, and the toddler comes home with a manual for what is to be done to nurture his development over the next 30 days. Someone cuts their finger, and band-aids materialize, knowing that they're going to stay a while. Slowly the kitchen transforms itself into a dog care facility, a classroom, and an infirmary. The accumulations start to take over like dust particles that seem innocent enough when sunlight unveils them floating in air, but before you know it, stake their claim on every surface without the basic decency of asking for permission. Questions arise. Does the kitchen lose its kitchenness when it's no longer in alignment with the program that was laid out for it through thousands of years of careful planning? Or does it shed its identity like a lobster that's outgrown its shell and embraced its more expansive new hybrid persona? Is it resentful of the functional colonization unfolding on its territory? The human body is made up of a head, a face, a torso, some internal organs, skin, arms and legs and hands and feet. The brain is for thinking and legs are for running. Every muscle and organ has its function, is what we're told. In that sense, we're just like a house. But just like the inside of a house, all is not as it looks on the pages of Architectural Digest. The body is a composition of holistic integration and functional specialization. Water and electricity, constructing and reconstructing a mass in perpetual motion. Building bridges with ice in 98-degree heat. Neurons inhabit our heads, but also our hearts and stomachs. Exercising our muscles profoundly affects our brains. I once read that wild horses are able to maintain 70% of their top speed within 6 months of their death. I wonder what our homes and our lives would look like if we could maintain that level of performance. Time itself would undergo a renovation, with the change in the experience adding a whole new wing to the existing structure. Every month, for nearly half of a lifetime of a human female, 37 years on average, the uterine lining gets instructions to start thickening and building itself up. The drama of this performance, all the pomp and circumstance of constructing scaffolding for a building that will never get built, reminds me of a memorable book title for a book about evolution, Good Enough, The Tolerance for Mediocrity in Nature and Society. Nature gets a C- for efficiency on this one. Of course, a living space for a human fetus, like every other space, requires energy and construction materials. These, like drugs traded in the black market, enjoy ubiquitous consumption, yet don't even get the hushed tone acknowledgement at Hollywood dinner parties. Extra sleep, higher caloric intake, reduced energy, diminished emotional regulation, and increased brain fog participate in the construction process over the course of weeks, only to find out yet again that the bureaucrats at Hormonal City Hall have scrapped the project. And then it begins anew for 443 more times. With that as an example in construction practices, it's no wonder that our kitchens don't function much differently. A monthly deep clean, before my mother's visit, resets the clock and the entirety of my life with the pristine glow of its clean slate. Yet the inevitable accumulation looms. It takes about a week for a kitchen table to go from easily accommodating a dinner set for 3 to barely having enough room for a toddler's yogurt ball and a sippy cup. At some point, the cross-functional colonization inevitably results in what all colonization causes: displacement. A migration takes place where a vase moves over to a chair, a fruit bowl makes its way into a microwave, and the blender unplugs to make room for a phone charger. There is a crossover every month in my life and in my kitchen. Subtle and hard to pin down, where all of a sudden the juggling act of daily routines starts to fall apart. Before you know it, you're helpless looking at metaphorical plates breaking against the hard tile of the kitchen flooring. It's a binary point of no return. The cycle has to be seen through completion before the reset button can be pressed. It's disappointing every time, but I get the sense that the disappointment stems from denial. The asynchronicity between my wishes and expectations, arguably socially constructed ones, and the spaces I inhabit, my body, my home, my community, all but ensures that there will be some broken glass on the floor. And we all know what happens with broken glass. It's a hard cleanup job, and someone's bound to get cut. Most of us have an intuitive understanding that a clock is an abstraction of time, but deep down we don't really believe it. It feels more solid than that, more absolute, more exact. It's uncomfortable to think that a chronometer is just a measuring tool that works on approximation. A clock takes an ocean and tries to separate and count out the drops of water, without any regard for currents and waves and variations in the chemical composition of each drop. The very counting process misses the whole point in a sense. An ocean is infinitely more than just a collection of drops. An ocean is an ecosystem. Mechanical conceptions of time ignore the complexities of time as an ecosystem. Time derives its meaning through the unfolding of events. For human beings, this unfolding is dictated by psychological, physiological, and spiritual factors. Collectively, these make up body time. Body time inputs are highly variable. They are an amalgamation of things as different as the weather today and the childhood trauma experienced decades ago. In other words, past, present, and future collapse into the body time of the present moment, stretching it, bending it, and cutting it as they please. It's inevitable then that mechanical time and body time exist in a state of constant tension with each other. They're nearly always out of sync, sometimes by a few seconds and other times by years. This asynchronicity amounts to living in a state of jet lag, with fluctuating levels of anxiety serving as a timekeeper, monitoring relative differences between mechanical time and body time. The spaces we live in become bodily extensions, prosthetics we build or purchase ready-made to make ourselves more comfortable. Unsurprisingly, we force them into the same mechanical time molds as our bodies. Or at least we try. Getting back to the kitchen, we already know that two different time conceptions are fighting to inhabit one space-time. The intended, predetermined, and generally accepted functions of a kitchen are to store food and cookware, prepare food, eat, and clean the remnants of the first three activities. This can be thought of as the mechanical time of the kitchen space. The accumulations outside the boundaries of these parameters that encroach into the kitchen regularly, but also unpredictably, are the kitchen's body time. In some ways, despite the popular view that these accumulations are foreign enemy invaders, they are actually the native inhabitants. Internal body and mind landscape redecorating and constructing a kitchen set in its own likeness. Or maybe it's nothing like that at all. Maybe the very idea of a kitchen is the chronos, an abstraction that approximates at best and misses the mark completely at worst. A shell that attempts to click us into the right position on a moment-by-moment basis with the implicit promise that as long as we play along, no tomato will rot and no emotional wound will go untended.